Support for the Capital Connection comes from
United University Professions, representing 37,000 academic and professional employees at SUNY campuses and teaching hospitals across New York State. Frederick E. Cole, President, uupinfo.org.
It's the Capital Connection. Hi, I'm David Gistina. Back with us. It's been a while. New York State Assembly Majority Leader Crystal Peoples-Stokes. She's a Democrat, serves Buffalo, 141st Assembly District. So glad to have you back with us on the Capital Connection.
It is my pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me, and happy holidays to all your listeners, you and all your listeners.
Yeah, well, you mentioned the holidays, and of course, that's a time of giving. Yes. They say, and it's better to give than receive, and yet so much tied to New York State these days, and many of the states in our nation, is the federal government, which isn't in a giving mood. They've been cutting a lot. And on top of all that, we're looking at the potential for a huge increase in healthcare costs as a result of what's going on now with the ACA. So, I know you are the state assembly majority leader, but Crystal Peoples-Stokes, the federal government plays into this, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And it is my hope and prayer that soon Americans will realize the disservice that the current administration is doing, not just to New York, but to Americans all over the country. And when they do realize the mistakes that they've made, we'll get it right-sided. In the meantime, as you mentioned, we represent New Yorkers, and we must figure out ways to make sure that they still have access to getting the health care that they need. And so I believe that's going to be our mission for at least the next couple of years.
Yeah, I imagine so. Well, I wanted to get your reaction because it happened this week, and I know, having talked to you for so long, that you weren't in support of this measure. That's the Medical Aid in Dying Act, but we learned this week that the governor is going to sign into law. What's your initial reaction?
I was not a supporter of that, medical aid in dying. I don't know. I've just come from the perspective that I've seen my loved ones transition. And I think if they could have taken something to make their life go away quicker, they would not have done that. And honestly, I won't consider it either. I think just based on my perspective, from my religion, I just don't think, we should be doing that. And the other thing that concerns me about it is it actually introduces a new drug into society. And while some people may think that this is an innocent thing that would just impact the people who take it that want to end their lives, we probably thought the same thing about fentanyl when we started. I mean, I never heard of fentanyl when I was in high school. It's something that just came about, and now it's all over the streets and it's harming people. So I'm not so sure that we should be moving towards other, drug use. So I'm opposed to that, but, I serve in a house where majority rules. We serve in a government where majority rules, and if this is what the majority has decided to do, for those people who desire to have that available to them, now they do. And so it's okay with me because it's not my choice, but I'm not the one that can decide everything for everybody's life. And if that's what they want, go for it.
We're speaking with Assembly Majority Leader Crystal Peoples-Stokes. With death and dying comes grieving. And, in addition, perhaps to your disappointment in the passage of the Medical Aid in Dying Act, I know you were disappointed that the governor vetoed, it's the fourth veto of the Grieving Families Act. Tell folks what that is and what it would do.
Well, the Grieving Family Act basically would allow people to have the opportunity to press civil charges against whoever could have been responsible for the loss of their loved one. And right now, if that person is working and has some measure of wealth, they still have access to that civil process. But children and people who, seniors who may not be in the workforce any longer, they don't have access to it. And I don't think we should judge people's lives based on their income. And, a loss is a loss. And if there's a way that you can feel some sort of comfort in the loss of your loved ones by, this civil procedure, I think it should be available to you. And so I don't necessarily understand why the governor continues to veto it. I do understand that, there are a lot of pieces of legislation that we work on that there's some things in there that the executive doesn't agree on. Seems to me they could have came up with some chapter amendment to make it more palatable to them, but to also allow these grieving families to have access to that civil procedure.
Now, do you have, Crystal Peoples-Stokes, do you have direct conversations with the governor on this, or is this usually, the governor's people talking to your people?
Yes, it's usually the governor's people talking to my people. I have a lot of direct conversations with her, by the way, because, as you know, I've known her for a long time, and we do have the ability to communicate.
And you're both from the Buffalo area.
And we're both from Buffalo, and we both are major Buffalo Bills fans.
Go Bills.
So we have a lot in common, but, sometimes you disagree with even your friends. I mean, sometimes you disagree with even your family. I disagree with my brothers and sisters on a regular basis, but doesn't mean I love them any less and will not want to work with them any less, and the same applies to the governor.
Well, let's talk about something you celebrated recently. I saw a picture of you with medical leaders, and you were celebrating the New York Heart Act, and now that was signed back in October. Can you tell listeners what this is and why there's need for celebration here?
Well, it actually amends a 75-year-old piece of legislation or regulation that says that if you are on Medicaid and you want to get a kidney transplant, you can only put your name on one list. Now, again, that's inherently unfair to people who don't have their own health insurance and can put in as many requests for transplants as they want. And so the doctor who I presented the pen bill to is the doctor that actually performed the surgery on my daughter, who passed 5 years ago, but prior to her passing, Dr. Kaler performed a kidney transplant on her and was successful, and it allowed her 3 additional years of life, which poured value into the life of her son. He got to grow up and, get through college, which she wanted to see him be able to do. And so I think that everybody should have a right to at least more than one place put your name on the list. There are a number of really great medical facilities that provide these transplants in and around the state of New York and, quite frankly, in and around the country. So if you have the ability to get your name on more than one list, I think that adds value to your opportunity to get a kidney transplant. The list is very long in Buffalo now. I want to say Dr. Kaler said it's about 100 people that are waiting or more for access to a kidney. So if any of these 100 people are on Medicaid, they can now put their name on another list. And maybe they'll be number 25 instead of a number 100. And so it just broadens the opportunity for people to have access to the kind of quality health care that we all deserve.
My goodness, I had no idea about that story that affected you so personally, and I'm sorry for your loss. Also, how's your grandson doing these days?
My grandson is doing very well. He has since the loss of my daughter has become a father. And so he has a 3-year-old daughter that is just an amazing part of our lives. And so he's doing well.
That's great to hear.
We're both doing well.
Well, and let's move on to another area that I know you're concerned about, and that's the mental health of our youth. You have something called Train the Trainer and peer-to-peer models. Tell our listeners about this.
Well, the governor has put a lot of resources into trying to deal with mental health for our total society, but more importantly, I think, for children. My office actually did a survey over the summer of people who are between the ages of 18 and 24 to find out what is it that you need and what is it that's keeping you from becoming more engaged civilly and voting and, working in your community with your neighbors to try and improve life. And one of the things that came out of that was almost startling to me is these folks wanted to see more access to mental health services in a place where they felt comfortable at. And I don't know about you, David, but I really don't think that 10 years ago, young people between the ages of 18 and 24 would have been mentioning anything about mental health. But it is so real now that, I guess COVID and social media and the violence that we see in our country, the bullying that we see in our country from the president on live TV every day that, trickles down to other people in our society, it's really a problem. And so if young people can say that this is a problem, then we need to find out how to solve it. So I actually have been talking with tons of people who are in the mental health field, many of them people of color who have started their own firms and doing this kind of work, and many of them who work for agencies. And I just wanted to think through, is there a way that we can begin helping young people at an earlier age to understand, that all of us at some point in time have some mental crisis going on in our lives, perhaps peers can begin helping peers get through this. And so I reached out to a well-known person who is really good at helping us deal with these sort of issues. And she came up, and I said I would like to see some sort of curriculum in the school system that begins in maybe in fifth grade, where young people are taught to help their classmates get through whatever difficulty they may have. And I don't know how that looks, but they came back with this idea of train the trainer. And so I really would like to see something like that happen in the budget this year that goes into school systems and begin the work of helping young people understand that sometimes you don't feel good in your head because of something that happened to you at home or on your way to school or something that consistently happens to you. If your peers could see that there's something hurting you, maybe there's some things they can say to help you deal with that. And so clearly there's a lot of work to be done on how this gets structured and how it gets set up, but I'm looking to do that into this ensuing session to make sure that at least 3 to 4 schools in Buffalo begin that process of educating people on the value of helping each other get through some sort of mental crisis. Even if it's not a crisis yet, sometimes you could stop it before it comes a crisis. And so we are going to focus on mental health issues. More importantly, for the 141st Assembly District, because that's where I got the message from. But I'm good with it going anywhere for people who want to figure out how do we help our children get through this mad world we live in, because the world is mad. There's a ton of stuff that's not good, and they have to experience it every day. We need to figure out how to help them get through it. And I think peer-to-peer, now I won't say counseling, but just encouragement, along with professionals, is going to help us get through this with our young people.
Yeah, and I can't help but think about the ban on cell phones now in schools, in which we're hearing a lot of anecdotal but very positive response from educators and even children in the schools. So if you see that working and students get more focused in school and aren't distracted, it could be a really good environment for this peer-to-peer program.
We're going to get the educational professionals at the table, too, and figure out how it gets structured. And how it can be used within the school systems, and I know that people were opposed to the cell phone ban, and in many ways I was too, because you give something to children, get them all used to it, and then all of a sudden you take it away from them. But it actually is turning out to be very effective. These young people are realizing that they had actually stopped talking to each other because they were so focused on their phones, and it's building relationships again. And a big part of society is about relationships, whether it's somebody in your family or just somebody in your neighborhood. And having good relationships will build good people. And we need to be building good people because at some point these young people are going to be the ones that's in charge of our society.
Yeah, and no matter how much wealth you have, where you come from, no one does anything alone, right? Majority Leader Peoples-Stokes, I mean, think about it. Someone has to build the roads that you travel down during the day. Just that alone.
Exactly. We all need each other. And in spite of what we're hearing from the federal government, we still all need each other. And we have to figure out how to include our children in this process of being healthy, more healthy as it relates to their mental capacity.
Well, let's just follow something from there in the idea that we need each other, that, the social group needs to be supported. When you look down at New York City in the recent election and see a Democratic Socialist, Zohran Mamdani, winning the election, and it seems like, at least in New York City, now we're in a blue state, very progressive, but it seems like there's a hunger for that side in the political aisle.
Well, by the way, congratulations to Zohran Mamdani, and, congratulations to the people in the city of New York who made that decision. It's your call. You're the voter, and if this is where you want to go, then that's where you should go. But, I'm not so sure that we're going totally socialist just because he's been, elected the mayor there. In fact,
right.
There are a number of policies that we have operating in our society now that are socialist, and they always have been. It's about the notion of taking care of people. And so that's what he ran on. It was a great message, and I hope that he's able to make that happen for the people in New York City. Although I do know it's easier to say these things than it is to get them all done.
Oh, yeah.
But hopefully he'll have the right people working with him. And By the way, David, in every level of government, there are people who are civil servants who have been there, for 20 years, and they like to do things the way they always have done them. So it's going to be a challenge for him and his administration to move that chain and changing how people who are in the positions of the civil servants to understand that this is the direction we're going now, and this direction will help us take care of all people, as opposed to taking care of a few and leaving some out.
Yeah. He seems to at least have gotten, some confirmation from New York Governor Hochul on child care in New York.
Child care is critically important. The governor's always focused on that, by the way, during her whole tenure. But, the more you provide for it and the more people get into the workforce in order to be able to take care of their families, the more you need. And so we will have to figure out ways not only to make it more beneficial for the folks who live in the great city of New York under the new ensuing mayor, but we have to figure out how to make that a reality for our people all over the state of New York.
Well, a reality in New York and many other states now is legal cannabis. I can't tell you, I shake my head on this. If you've thought about it, 30, 40 years ago, you never thought this would happen ever, but it is here. You've been involved with it from the beginning. And I wanted to talk to you about your efforts to improve New York's medical cannabis program. Now, medical marijuana is harder for people to get their products on the medical marijuana list because it costs more in terms of testing. You and I have talked about this before, and that seems kind of backwards in that we should be treating this as a drug. We should be researching it. And to that end, we're hearing the Trump administration is going to open it up on the federal level for this, and that the medical side should have the most choice and options for those who may be suffering.
Well, I actually wholeheartedly agree. What's missing with medical cannabis is research. And so, I clearly do not like most of the things that, the current administration in D.C. is saying. But on this issue, I think that there needs to be some descheduling and to give people an opportunity to, one, grow their businesses and using the existing tax structure to claim business expenses just like every other business does. But also to, go do a deep dive into the research on what this plant can be used for medicinally. And I still don't think we know the full scope of that because we haven't done the research. People haven't been allowed to do the research because of the federal rules. So if it changes and opens that door, then I'm super grateful for that.
Now, one of the things I know you want to do is to bolster the Cannabis Reinvestment Fund and how the board disperses the money. Can you tell us more about that plan?
Well, that 40% of those resources was put there because you understand the harm that was done to people in their lives and, quite frankly, in their communities during the war on drugs.
Mm-hmm.
So it's supposed to go to enhancing the lives of people who suffered during the war on drugs. And I'm not sure that happened with this last distribution that they did. And honestly, I know there's some people in Tonawanda who received resources, and Tonawanda was not a part of the drug war. Clearly they were users. They had to be because now they sell it there legally, and those areas are doing very well. But there was no trauma on any of their families heading off to jail, and grandmother trying to raise great-grandchildren and grandchildren because their families have been incarcerated. Their parents have been incarcerated. So it's got to be more pointed towards fixing the harm of the war on drugs. So if the people who sit around the table that are on the Cannabis Advisory Board understand the trauma that young people and children and families went through during the course of the war on drugs, then they should be identifying how do you fix that trauma. You don't fix it by just giving those dollars to someone who writes the best grant. You don't do it that way. You do it in a way that figures out where are the problems, what are they, and how do we pour into them. It's very difficult to get money through the state of New York. It's no easy task. It's basically a reimbursement system. So you have to spend before you can get access to the resources that are available. Well, that's not going to work for the Community Re-Advisory Board that's going to pour into the lives of people who suffered during the war on drugs. Because quite honestly, the people who can do the best work there, one, they're not the best grant writers, and two, they're not in a position where they can spend first to implement their programmatic activity and then get reimbursed. They're not in that position. So I think we need a whole new framework specifically for those dollars. Something that, I don't know, maybe attaches the larger sum to United Way or LISC or the Urban League or some organization that has a capacity to take the dollars, go into the communities, and find the people that work in the street that's changing people's lives and help them do that more.
From there, let's talk about housing for a second. Now, I think in most of the cities, these upstate industrialized former mill towns, upstate have seen their share of collapsing industries and then vacant buildings. And I know that's a big problem in Buffalo that you're trying to do, which is to convert these vacant buildings into housing. One of the top issues, not only in New York, but around the country, there's not enough housing. Can you talk about that a little bit? You know, obviously it goes beyond the city of Buffalo.
It actually does. And by the way, it's economics 101. The housing issue is just this. The more people demand something, generally the more it costs. And so if you don't have enough supply in the system to meet the demand, the costs are going to go up, and it's going to be too expensive for people to live. It's one of the things Zohran Mamdani is going to try to attack in New York City. And so do we need to have more housing? Absolutely. Because the more you have in supply, the more likely you are to bring the cost down. So, you know, during COVID, a lot of offices that are in downtown Buffalo, and I imagine in some downtown cities and other areas as well, were filled with workers. But after COVID, a lot of those workers didn't come back. And quite frankly, the way businesses operate nowadays, some people are still working from home. And so if people are no longer in these office buildings that used to house employees, then these office buildings could be restructured for housing. And I really want to try to see something like that happen for the city of Buffalo as well. Not to mention that, you know, we have already been successful in using tax credits to use old buildings to create housing. But some of these are not necessarily old buildings. They're just office spaces that are no longer being used. And so we'd like to find some ways to push that forward in a more expedient fashion.
Well, we're running out of time very quickly. I did want to bring this up because all of us, of course, in New York were, but specifically in Buffalo, there was a mass shooting. That was back in 2022 at the Tops Friendly Market in May.
Yeah, May 14th.
And we have not, it doesn't stop. I mean, there are these endless shootings, the latest one at Brown University, of course, the Australian shooting, which was anti-Semitic in nature. But, you know, we've talked about this over the years. When is this, you know, carnage going to end?
Well, I mean, I think it ends when we are able to get people healthy mentally. You know, a lot of young people are being radicalized on the internet. And they're doing things not because they were born or raised to go out and do that, but they've been educated to do it. They're on these weird underground websites that honor them for, you know, being mean to people. And I think it's all about the mental capacity of our citizen base. And I don't know, you know, how long it's going to take to fix that, but I know that we certainly are delayed with the current federal administration because there's something going on mentally there, too. I mean, children being abused, pedophilia, the whole church thing with young people being abused, that's impacting all of their mental health, by the way. And then they come into society and either they become parents and create another level of people with mental health problems, or they don't become parents and they're miserable, and so they make everybody else around them miserable. Sometimes we do the harm to ourselves by how we allow people to be treated in our society. And that all plays out in mental health. I wish in my deepest of hearts that people would realize that you don't need to kill a lot of people to feel better. Whatever your anger is about, you can just take care of yourself and your family and focus on that instead of figuring out how to hurt somebody because you're hurt. Hurt people hurt other people. And these people are hurt, either they're mental or physical or both. And if we don't figure out ways to help them be unhurt, they are going to keep hurting people because that's what hurt people do.
I don't know how the time goes so quickly, but it's gone too fast, and that just means you'll have to come back once again. We've been speaking with Assembly Majority Leader Crystal Peoples-Stokes, a Democrat from Buffalo on this week's Capital Connection. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you taking the time. Happy holidays to you and yours.
My pleasure, David. Happy holidays to you as well.
We'll catch up in the new year.
New Year's coming. Happy New Year.
Support for the Capital Connection comes from
United University Professions, representing 37,000 academic and professional employees at SUNY campuses and teaching hospitals across New York State. Frederick E. Cole, President, uupinfo.org.
The Capital Connection is a production of WAMC Northeast Public Radio. You can listen to The Capital Connection anytime at WAMCpodcast.org or anywhere you get your podcast. And join us again next week at this same time for another political conversation. For The Capital Connection, I'm David Guistina.